Lumos.
Let's pull out our wands and light the tips, but we're not blowing smoke. We're here to illuminate Polyjuice Potion. For starters, let's just get the general thing out of the way. Where do you stand on Polyjuice in general? Like, its existence period.
I think it's pretty cool, to be honest.
Yeah?
Taking it back into a Marvel thing real quick. You know, you have, and this is terrible because I cannot remember her name, so apologies, but like Jennifer Lawrence's character. I know. I don't spend a lot of time with the X-Men movies, that's why. But like Jennifer Lawrence's character in the X-Men movies, right? She can totally change her appearance. How amazingly like useful is that to like get where you need to go?
Oh, are you thinking Mystique? Right?
Yes, thank
Mystique?
you. Oh, there we
That's
go.
the one.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I saw
like,
X-Men as a kid.
It's been a hot minute. But yeah, like those are so useful. So like as if I'd want it as a superpower, why wouldn't I want this gross drink that could make me do it if I wasn't born with the superpower?
That you get to drink every hour, apparently.
Yeah, gross.
So I guess you obviously are in favor of the of just the potion in general.
Yes.
Do you have any problem with like the loss of agency for the person that's like being impersonated at all?
Yeah. I mean, if you're the drinker, it's all good. If you're the impersonated, not so much. You know, like, okay, if you're going to look at like what's happening now that would be like even remotely similar, like the idea of like AI and like all those like TikTok videos of like fake Keanu or whatever. Like, that's totally not Keanu, but like it looks like he's doing all this stuff. Sure, he doesn't love that, you know? Like, I wouldn't love it if someone, like, made an AI of me. That's kind of the same thing as someone, like, changing their whole, like, features to be me. Like, what would they do? I don't know. How could they do it? Like, there's a lot of things. They could totally mess up your whole life.
Yeah, and I think, and tying it back to your point about, like, Mystique, I think it's, and I could be totally wrong about this, but I think that it's, like, fairly accurate to say that she's only changing in outward appearance of like what you see.
That tracks.
But like underneath she's still her like kind of scaly self or whatever. Like she doesn't, and I don't want to make this totally gross, but like in Harry Potter, like you are becoming that person with every single anatomical feature at all. And so if you're the person being like polyjuiced into, like, let's just, on OnlyFans you get to pick flattering angles at least, but like somebody polyjuices into you, every single flaw, every single bit about yourself, even not the most private bits, is just on full display to that person that becomes you. I mean, we get, you know, jokes about tattoos that, you know, I knew Ginny was joking about that tattoo, Harry. Like, you know, and Hermione is like, oh my gosh, your eyesight really is awful. And that kind of stuff where it's like, you get everything. Imagine being like, I don't know, imagine being like, romance in these books is awful, right? Like, it's
truly
terrible.
awful. Yeah.
But imagine being like Yule Ball-ish age, and you're like Ron or Hermione, and for whatever reason they have to polyjuice into like each other. How awkward is like later when they become a thing? It's kind of like, oh yeah, I knew about that birthmark from when I was you.
I didn't think about it that way. I was more like, what are they gonna do to ruin my reputation?
Right.
But like,
I mean, that's a piece too. That's definitely a big piece of it too. But like, there's also this layer of like, privacy is out the window in every sense of the word.
Well, that was one of the things too that like I don't remember thinking about when I was first reading the books, but like when Harry talks about how painful it is to feel his like knuckles expanding and the muscles, I was like, oh my god, like, you know, Mystique does her whole thing and she's like, boop, and she's like good to go, and like these people are literally like growing like bones, and I was like, oh my god. I was like, I'm good.
And I guess maybe there's something to the amount of transformation that has to happen. Like, I don't know, think about the Seven Potters movie thing where, like, Fred and George have to shrink, and like other people have to grow, and like, is it worse for Fleur and Hermione, who literally have to like go through a full everything transformation, than like a Ron who's like kind of, you know, generally, I think Ron's supposed to be taller, so maybe Ron's the wrong one. But like, there's got to be somebody in there that's like generally the same build and height as Harry or whatever. Like, do they have to have less to like go through? I guess to transform. I don't know. It's very weird. And then it led me down this weird thought pattern of this thing existing in the Wizarding World. Are there 20-somethings at like Wizarding World bars that are like polyjuicing into some really, really intense, like extreme forms of like role playing, literally becoming different people?
That's a really good question.
A weird underground like rave thing? I don't know.
I could totally see it. I really could. Just like ordering Polyjuice Potion like a cocktail. I love it.
And yeah, because people, I mean, there are people that are into that. If you ever watched, what is it, Four Christmases with Vince Vaughn, and hell if I can remember his co-star in this very moment, but they, like, the movie opens on that, right? Like, they're pretending to be, and then they just go home, and they're like, hey, that was fun.
Yeah.
Imagine Polyjuice. What the fuck? Anyways,
there's a lot of opportunity there to have some fun and also do some damage.
Right, and like go commit crimes and get caught visually, and then imagine heist people put masks of like fake, I don't know, movie characters and shit like that, just to like have just polyjuice into somebody else and just be out in the open. I'm doing this crime.
Or better yet, like if you're like Malfoy who hates Hermione, right? You like go into Hermione and then frame someone you don't like for committing this crime.
Yeah,
it would be like 2 for 1.
Exactly. Like there's so many weird turns that Polyjuice can take, and weird like plot things that could be opened up by its sheer existence in the Wizarding World that we don't see played out. It's kind of terrifying, if I'm honest.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, dear God. It's Time Turner's time, too. Speaking of which, the level of plot convenience it also introduces, like, this comes back a lot. By my count, there's the whole year of Fake Moody in Book 4. Not to mention the subplot within it of Barty Crouch Jr. breaking out of Azkaban with Polyjuice Potion with his mom, which is kind of tragic and also kind of a fucked up storyline. We have Crabbe and Goyle doing this in Book 6 to pretend to be little first years. We have the Seven Potters in Book 7. We have breaking into the Ministry in Book 7. We have going to Godric's Hollow in Book 7. We have Hermione as Bellatrix breaking into Gringotts in Book 7. There's a bunch of like imposter, transfiguration, and Polyjuice kind of stuff in the Fantastic Beasts movies, and we're not even going to get into the disaster that was Cursed Child. Did I miss any instances that you can remember of Polyjuice in this series after now?
I don't believe so.
So, how do you feel about it coming back so many times?
I feel like it was one of those things where the author was like, I'm going to create this as a plot device, and then realized every time she had a plot tangle, she could use it again, and it was the gift that kept on giving. But it works. So, you know,
it does.
Kudos.
It does work. What about logistics? So, it takes the trio a month to make this stuff, and we have zero indication that it takes them a month because they're 12. Like, it actually takes a month to make this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, how feasible is it that there's enough just, like, on hand for all of the things that I just said to happen again in like, more spur-of-the-moment things? Like, does this stuff go bad? Like, is there just a vat of it that they can just pull from, or is it literally just, like you said, plot convenience? It's just here. Moody's prepared.
When you first started your question, all I could think of was like a constant like always on brewery of like Polyjuice Potion that they had for whenever they needed it. So that's what's living in my headcanon, and I've decided that's the answer.
Okay. And it's run by, I mean, it's got to be underground, right? It's got to be somebody that Moody. So Moody was a pretty badass Auror at some point, right? Like,
yeah.
Moody's got informants.
Oh, totally.
It's one of his PIs that runs this little underground Polyjuice brewery, right? That's what's happening? All right.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Buy it on demand. Let's go.
Click here. Amazon for Polyjuice.
Received by Owl in 2 days.
I love it. The few times that we get descriptions, like in this book, like you were mentioning, there's like a lot of pain and a lot of unpleasantness that goes with this, but it's also described to be quite disgusting, particularly in this book with Crabbe Goyle and Millicent Bulstrode. I think that's it, Bulstrode. I don't know why, I just have to say it multiple times. Bulstrode. It's brought up that it's absolutely disgusting, just gross. Essence of Millicent is, I think, what they were. Yep. Mm-hmm. The face that you're making that nobody else can see, I feel you. But then in the Seven Potters, Hermione actually has a bit of dialogue and mentions how much better Harry like looked or tasted or smelled or whatever than like Crabbe and Goyle or something. And it's like, is it? I mean, thank you. I don't know. Like, how do you?
Well, also, like, the fact that it turned different colors per person. Like, she was, like, this gross, like, vomit yellow, and they were poop brown, and I was like, that's freaking disgusting. Like, I don't remember what Harry's color was, but I was like, does the color indicate level of grossness?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Is it weird that people's, like, essence has a consistency? Like, a taste?
I feel like if we're gonna go, like, let's just take it, Polyjuice Potion, face value, right? I feel like if you're gonna take it at face value, this totally just is aligned, right? Like, it's like, all right, here's this drop thing, whatever, that, like, makes you turn into another person, and it's super painful, and it's super gross, but also there's this added layer that, like, whoever you're drinking the essence of, it really, like, changes the whole color and the whole experience. I feel like if we're gonna just, like, go all in on believing Polyjuice Potion, that this is just the next level, like, you're like, yep, this, I'm gonna go A, let's go B, I'm here.
Okay, who has the most pleasant Polyjuice experience? Let's say experience.
Luna Lovegood.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that. It's probably very quirky. Something about it very odd. I like it. I like that.
Yeah.
I was thinking
like Oreos with Pop Rocks. Yeah. They're sweet, but also have Oreos a little. With Pop Rocks. They do make those. I had them, and they're kind of awful. But like, if you're into that, I could totally see why someone would like it.
Nice. I was thinking of, because it's not a secret in this fandom that this author uses physical appearance to also equate to good or evil.
Value in general. Yeah.
Yeah, in general, there's definitely a correlation in a lot of cases to that. I think it's overblown a little bit because we do get, like, Tom Riddle was very handsome and very conniving and, like, very evil, but then ended up turning into, like, a snake monster. So, I mean, eventually turns evil. Umbridge is a squat, ugly toad. Crabbe and Goyle, big, fat, and ugly. The Dursleys, ugly, ugly, fat, fat. It's a theme, right? But then, like... Yes. Harry is fairly decent looking, and Hermione turns into the belle of the ball, and like all of the the good people are handsome for the most part. But then like I present to you Lockhart. But anyways, so that led me to thinking somebody like a Fleur, who's like part Vila and supposed to be like completely just gorgeous off the page, like probably has a much less awful experience with Polyjuice. It's probably like champagne with like a hint of some fucking crystals or something.
I see it. I love that.
Okay. So all in all, I guess I get less annoyed than some about this being a very like convenient plot point, I guess. I think it's kind of like whenever we get a point that we're trying to get to in the series, that like a plot point that hasn't been fleshed out quite good enough, or like important conclusions that someone writing this might not quite know how to get here. We just get Dumbledore knows and we move on. That's kind of what Polyjuice is. We need to figure out a way to make the Polyjuice great. It's definitely not a lot moving forward, and this chapter marks the introduction. And I'm sure that I'll have plenty to say about it the next 87,000 times it happens again. Any other Polyjuice thoughts?
No, I think my big one was like just being shocked by how painful it was and like not remembering that. So I wanted to hit that one, and now that I did, I'm satisfied.
All right. Oh, and that brings up another thing, because you said you're a movie watcher more than a book reader, I guess you could say. Like, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's not just Harry Potter. I don't reread in general, so it's not exclusive to this series. So I'll watch a movie 7 times before I'll reread a book.
Yeah, and that's fair. How do you feel about the change that they made, inconsistently, I might add, about the voice? In the book, it's clear that the voice changes. In the movies, they didn't change the voice except for when it was plot convenient with, like, Moody.
Yeah.
Fake
Moody. Which,
Moody.
like, is annoying because, like, it only, like, it would totally give it away. Yeah. Like, you know, I mean, Malfoy, for example, in this, you know, going in this particular chapter, Harry's voice comes out of Crabbe and Goyle's body, like, it's definitely gonna, like, even Malfoy, who's, like, you know, he has his thick moments. Like, he would know something's up. I don't know how much he knows about Polyjuice Potion at this stage, but, like, it would completely put a hole in the plan. So it makes sense that, you know, the voice would match the body. Also, if you're physically changing into that person, like, your vocal cords will also change. So just even from a logistical standpoint, I don't get it. It annoys me. I like consistency. I'm not a fan at all.
And that's the correct answer. So, with that, let's jump into divination. It's time to highlight 4 moments in the chapter that foreshadow something to come in the future. 1. Harry was just thinking that all he needed was for Dumbledore's pet bird to die while he was alone in the office with it, when the bird bursts into flames. This is admittedly a little on the nose, because it pays off in less than 2 seconds. I could have thrown in something here, like Hagrid related, Lucius related, but I feel like we touched on that plenty. But what stands out to me more here than the bird dying is it also is the meeting that kind of like lays the groundwork, not between Harry and Dumbledore, but this is actually a meeting between Harry and Fawkes, and with the Sorting Hat, because Fawkes ends up coming down to the chamber to help Harry fight the Basilisk and brings the Sorting Hat with it. So this experience in the office with those 2 objects is like kind of a cool little foreshadow.
Totally. And I also think too, like, Dumbledore says something, there's a line in this chapter where he says something about the Phoenix and their loyalty, and that whole, you know, that's why Fawkes comes to him. And so, like, that was something when I was reading that really stuck out to me too, was like, not only of course is it the first time we meet Fawkes, but it lays that you know, line between Fawkes and loyalty, and how he's always going to help Harry as long as he's loyal to Dumbledore.
Yeah, that's absolutely very astute. And of course we also get like the you know, tears have healing powers and they can lift heavy shit, and it's like, oh yeah, this is how we get out of the chamber. I mean, come on. Some of it was meant to be foreshadowed. 2, Ginny didn't find it amusing either. Oh, don't. She wailed every time Fred asked Harry loudly who he was planning to attack next, or when George pretended to ward off Harry with a large clove of garlic when they met. and that's a quote, by the way. All of these are quotes. This has become a bit of a theme foreshadow because every time something happens with the Heir of Slytherin in this book, we get a check-in on Ginny, and we see her kind of like slow spiral into becoming more distraught and becoming more apparently just aware that this could actually be her. Like, she's starting to piece things together, and you can kind of see it. And it's very clever. It's very well done. It's the types of shit that are awesome in this series, and it's number 2 foreshadow for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also picked that up when I was reading it because I obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, was like, well, I know who the not the Heir of Slytherin is, but like, you know, who's opening the chamber. So that's always fun. But when you were saying that, it actually made me think about how, you know, she's spiraling because she thinks it might be her in a similar way that, like, Harry's spiraling, thinking that he might be a Slytherin. Like, even though he knows he's not physically doing these acts, he thinks it's sort of possible that, like, maybe he, like, might be the heir, but, like, not opening it, like, you know, because he might be a Slytherin. So it's interesting that they're both spiraling, but, like, one of them is actually doing that, and one of them is just, like, gaslighting himself. So I thought that was, like, an interesting parallel, too.
Yeah, and he kind of thinks that it is, and he kind of thinks that even though he doesn't know he's doing it with the weird voices he's hearing and stuff like that, he's wondering, like, am I somehow doing this and I don't even know it?
Yeah.
And
which is the exact same conversation Ginny's having, except the answer is yes.
Yeah, she's absolutely doing this and not even know it until she starts to figure it out. It's crazy. 3. Percy. Ron corrected him automatically. Whatever, said Malfoy. I've noticed him sneaking around a lot lately, and I bet I know what he's up to. He thinks he's going to catch Slytherin's heir single-handed. This is a fun one. I love bringing this up because this is like a side plot that's happening very, very deep beneath the surface of our main plot. Percy's kind of being treated a little bit as like a red herring, or at least a distraction. And what's actually happening, and what this is actually foreshadowing, is that he's got a girlfriend. Yeah. The girl that Harry and Ron ran into that got all huffy when they asked where, you know, for directions to the Slytherin common room. Like, her and Percy literally just hooked up somewhere nearby.
Yep.
And it's, to me, hysterical. I like having these moments of, like, levity, especially when you know what they're actually leading to. It's funny.
I think it's interesting because I'm just like, why Percy? Like, of all people, like, he's, like, so the worst. Like, you know, like, from a standpoint of, like, having a partner, I'm like, ugh, you know? Like, as the female, I'm going to give a female perspective here. No. Just no, you know? Like, and I know that's why it's done, but, like, reading it, I'm like, ew. Like, no, not in a million years.
I mean, it seems like we don't get a lot from her directly, but, I mean, she is another prefect.
Mm-hmm.
She does respond in this moment very pompous as shit. It's like, maybe they're perfect for each other.
You know what? There is someone out there for everyone, and maybe Percy found his person. The one other thing I will say is, like, knowing that Tom Riddle was a prefect, and, you know, Percy then in that same interaction says, like, oh, he'd never attack, or, you know, the heir would never attack a prefect. And, you know, Malfoy's comment about him, you know, wanting to single-handedly find the heir of Slytherin, like, one, that's what Tom Riddle did when, and, you know, listeners, you can't see my air quotes, but I am air quoting the heck out of this, because that's what he did when he found Hagrid. And two, like, little does Percy know that not only is, you know, the heir of Slytherin not above attacking another prefect, but in fact is a prefect. Yeah, is a prefect, which is, like, very, very interesting to me, too.
I like it. 4. Oh, yeah, whoever it was expelled. They're probably still in Azkaban. Azkaban? Said Harry, puzzled. Azkaban, the wizard prison goyle, said Malfoy, looking at him in disbelief. Honestly, if you were any slower, you'd be going backward. Great fucking line. Draco sucks. Great line.
Yeah.
This isn't a completely direct foreshadow, but it does pay off later when we learn that Hagrid was the one expelled for being scapegoated by Tom Riddle, and that they cart him off to Azkaban later in this book.
Yes. I also immediately think of Sirius and what's happening in the next book, because this is really the first time, I believe, that we have Azkaban mentioned by name, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think you're right.
So, this really kind of sets that, ground level knowledge dump, if you will, for like what we're going to really dive into next book as well.
Yeah, I like it. Those were the 4 I had. Did you have any others that you wanted to hit on?
No, I mean, I think that was it.
Cool.
We talked about the Polyjuice a ton, so I don't need to go into that in
we
but that's
did.
one of my favorite things, so.
We did. Polyjuice. Polyjuice is a foreshadow to more Polyjuice. And
Yes.
more and more and more Polyjuice. And I guess them not having a plan after they Polyjuiced is a foreshadow to them later not having a plan when they Polyjuiced. So, I guess we can go ahead and give away some
House points.
In true Hogwarts fashion, these points are completely subjective with no oversight and fully at my discretion. This week, I'm giving house points to Hermione for pulling off this potion and not killing all 3 of them. 10 points. Ron and Harry for somehow not getting caught even though they were completely terrible undercover. They're getting 5 points collectively. 2.5 each because it's not worth that much. Fred and George for bringing levity to this situation. 5 points each. That is worth something.
Yes.
Any points you want to give away?
Yes, I want to give 5 to Hagrid for being the best loyal friend ever. I'm willing to go in front of the Ministry for Harry. Always a good, always worth something. And Fox for just being a badass and rising out of the ashes so that he can come save Harry later.
How
5
many?
points. 5.
5.
We'll do 5.
Yes. Badass. All right, so now we have to take points away, and I'm doing so first from Draco for being racist and wishing death upon a classmate. 50 points. And Dumbledore I'm taking away for not taking the opportunity in his office to counsel Harry in any way. Talk to him about what's going on, maybe try to help him. He's being alienated by the entire school, but all the head of that school does is teach him about his pet bird and ask one question before sending him on his way. So for that, he's losing 10 points. Anybody you want to take points away from?
Well, Draco was my big one, so I appreciate that you called that out. I think I'll take 2.5 points each from Crab and Goyle for being lured in by Sleeping Draught and Cake. I don't know about you, but I do not just eat random food that I find laying around for a reason.
Yep. I'm going to go with 2.5 each for dumb. Got it. I will add and subtract these from our tally for the end of this season's Binge Awards episode. Oh, speaking of which, did you listen to that one by chance?
I believe so. Yes.
Did you enjoy it?
I did. It was fun.
Great.
We don't get to do stuff like that, so I love it when you can, encapsulate the end of a season. That was super fun.
Nice. I'm very glad someone liked it. The only feedback I think that stuck out to me when I did it was the hosts of When Harry Met Movies podcast. Shout out to them. But they actually retweeted it, and they're like, "This is worth the listen for the rap alone." And so, yeah. Anyways, before we go, I'd say begrudgingly, but this is kind of one of my favorite things about this podcast, is we have to acknowledge the moments in this chapter that were utterly
Ridiculous.
It's not an episode of The Binge if we don't call out what didn't make any sense at all, starting with the Sorting Hat telling Harry again that he could have been in Slytherin. I completely disagree. We talked about that. I think it's a stupid plotline. We talked about that. And I know I'm a minority in this. We talked about that too, but I don't care. The whole plan that they have is ridiculous. We talked about that quite a bit too. It's ridiculous how little they actually planned. We talked about that too. And what they didn't even plan on what they'd say to Malfoy to get him on the topic. They didn't do anything. It's ridiculous how they got the hairs. We talked about that. You just talked about that. It's ridiculous how bad they were undercover. We talked about that. And it's ridiculous that they didn't get caught. Now we're talking about that. It's ridiculous that the plan works at all. It's ridiculous that Hermione didn't think through past turning into their targets. It's ridiculous that this happens again in Book 7. A lot of this is just utterly ridiculous, and it's kind of ridiculous that Polyjuice exists at all.
Yes.
anything stick out to you that was ridiculous?
Also just the very convenient walk by of Malfoy when they needed to find the common room and get in there.
Very, very ridiculous.
Yeah.
Very ridiculous. And ridiculous that they asked the chick that Percy was with to where their common room was, and she responds with, like, I'm in Ravenclaw. Like, don't they have something on their robes that signifies what house they're in?
Well, yeah, and they're all, like, colored. Like, they have the hoods have the color of the house on them.
Right. Like, and if not the school robes, because, like, the robes they get separately, but there's something. They have a sash. They have something that indicates what house they're in. I know they do in the movies, like, but I'm pretty sure that's book canon, too. Like, she would be in blue. Obviously, not green. I mean, maybe Crabbe and Goyle are colorblind, and that came through in the Polyjuice. I don't know. It's kind of ridiculous. With that, we've reached the end of this episode of The Binge. As always, shout out to producer Jack, who I work like a dog. Remember to follow and subscribe to the show on whatever podcast player you're using. And if it supports a rating and review option, please leave one. Please. Please, please, please. And if you're so inclined, check out the additional benefits available on patreon.com/belatedbinge. Again, Taylor, I can't thank you enough for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
This was a lot of fun. Plug anything that you want before we close up shop.
Sure. So if you guys are fans of Marvel, you can check out our show, Let's Talk Marvel Fan Theories, on any of the podcast platforms. Our blog is linked in any of our show notes. So if you want to check us out on the platform and then head over to the blog, you can find us there. And our main hub for any news coming out of Marvel and from our show is Let's Talk MFT on Twitter. You should definitely give us a follow there as well.
Nice. Go do it. Yeah, so if you're reading along, next episode, we're covering Chapter 13 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Big shock, because 13 comes after 12, and it's called The Very Secret Diary. I wonder what it'll be about. Until then, I'll see you next time on the Belated Binge podcast.
It's okay, Hermione, Harry said quickly. We'll take you up to the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey never asks too many questions. It took a long time to persuade Hermione to leave the bathroom. Moaning Myrtle sped them on their way with a hearty guffaw. Wait until everyone finds out you've got a tail.